one of the challenges that we face when we deploy charging infrastructure in terms of making it accessible and getting the design right is actually engaging all of the stakeholders involved in that process. We've got quite often multiple stakeholders at different levels and different layers. We've got developers, we've got landowners, we've got consultants, we've got brokers. There's quite often 2 or 3 layers to some of the deals that we agree, and occasionally the design has already been produced by somebody, the layout's already been designed, or we've got a limited amount of space that we deploy. And so there's a huge amount of effort in some instances where we lobby and we educate and we broker a slightly different deal with different developers or landowners to make sure that we're introducing the most amount of accessibility in the design as we possibly can. There are occasions when actually we deploy the ultimate accessible site where we've got, ultra wide bays and we've got the right distances and layouts, but there are times when we do need to negotiate and try and find a sensible middle ground for people so that we can give a level of accessible charging, but also make sure that charging is actually deployed in that location. I think the alternative on some occasions is actually local communities might not get any EV charging at all because the expectation of a landowner or developer is that the standard bays, which we don't do. We might have done historically a few years ago with some of the legacy sites, but certainly what we've done over the last couple of years, we just don't do. And then there's that real tough decision to be made as to whether or not we put our brand in there or we walk away and we let somebody else drop a brand in there. Actually, the alternative is nobody deploys any EV charging. So the position we take is to educate, and I think we've done really well. We've not failed on many occasions. There's 1 or 2 sites that we've not deployed upon because we couldn't get anything agreed. Yeah. But most of the time we end up in a fair position. There's a bit of a trade-off on both sides, but we certainly ensure that we've got a level of accessibility in each of those deployments.
And this is such a good point because I see so much on social media. There are groups out there being rallied by, quite rightly so, a lot of activists, big voices, definitely in the disabled community, where they're voicing their concerns over certain sites, and it's usually the charge point network operator who will take an absolute bashing online as a result. And it's not actually your fault, and it's normally not even your decision as to how many bays you're allowed to then transition into. So for example, I know that there are certain retail parks out there who will say, you've got 8 bays, you've got 8 parking bays, we need them to be 8 bays. We don't want them to be 6 bays or 5 bays. They have to be 8 bays, and they will hold really firm onto that. So I'm glad that you've said, that you have and you would walk away from particularly aggressive landowners who might not have that same vision that you do. And I think that's the right choice because, like I said, with that whole acquisition and merger piece, when it comes forward, it's going to be much easier. Your assets will be more valuable to someone else because they have been inclusive of the disabled community, and they'll be easier to sell on to someone else rather than having that problem where you're working with a landowner who's been really difficult and is probably just thinking with their pets.
Brand consistency is really important as well, right? We spoke about that customer experience, that first experience. Yeah. So they get a really great first experience. That needs to follow on onto other locations and other hubs. So we need consistency throughout our brand, and that's where that accessibility piece comes in. And it's much more than that, but ultimately that does run through our brand. So it's really important to us. It depends on where these sites come from. So we've got a really great network development team, and they'll go out there and they'll locate sites and they'll deal directly with landowners or retail parks or other locations, and we can direct that conversation and that knowledge and impart that knowledge from the very, very start of the conversation and bring people on that whole journey. And that's great. And we don't face too many challenges there. I think the real challenge is when it comes through and it's a tender process. This is the corporate world, and there are tenders, and we submit bids alongside other CPOs, and some of those are just hard and fast. It's 4 bays or it's 8 bays or it's 10 bays in a standard width. And that's the type of charger that we need. And what does your proposal look like? Ultimately, we either lose those tenders if we go with a fully blown accessible bid, or we take a decision to no bid. But they exist, you know, and they exist in the market. And you're absolutely right. CPOs do take a bit of a bashing for some of those locations. But I do find myself, you know, questioning, if everybody no bids, there's the potential for no EV charging in that location, and what's right or wrong. I think the best outcome is that we can go through a journey of educating and, you know, steering people to a bit of a hybrid approach. That's the best outcome. But for me, the worst outcome is probably absolutely no EV charging at all in that community. And like I said, our brand means that we don't do that, and that's not the right site for us. But are we better off getting some EV charging in that location versus none? Maybe, I don't know.
I think we're going to see a change in the whole tender process as well, you know. So there is a county council out there who have recently put out for tender their local charging infrastructure. And one of the eligibility criteria that they listed was that the site must achieve a minimum 4-star ChargeSafe rating or equivalent. There is no equivalent right now. So if you are delivering on accessibility, you're already going to be on your way to, if not almost guaranteed, that you would get a 4-star ChargeSafe rating, because accessibility is such a huge chunk of our inspection criteria. And you guys know exactly what goes into every single point in our inspection criteria, because you're an accredited partner. You've done that training with us. You know how to get to the 4 stars. I'm hoping that will be picked up by all the other local authorities who are saying, actually, we are prioritizing accessibility. We will give you room to make this work. Just show us how you're going to do it.
I mean, it's really important right now that there are bits that we're working on that will come through over the next few months that I'm really excited about. We're working through roaming agreements right now, which means drivers will see us through lots of different technology partners. They don't just have to go onto our app or anybody else's app. And I've been a big believer from the very start, actually, about building what I would define an open network, because partnerships are so important. And I think we get lots of different ideas, and collaboration adds value. Big believer in that. But the other bit that I'm really excited about, because I think standardization around the customer experience is really important. So plug and charge, for me, will be a complete game changer. I drive a Tesla, and I love the Tesla experience. And I know I should be talking about Pogo and everything that's great about Pogo.
But it's simplistic, right? You pull up, plug in.
It's what they've done with that plug and charge experience. I think it's fantastic, and I think it's really exciting. That's set them apart for a long, long time. But that's about to become adopted by the wider industry, essentially. So, you know, the ability for drivers that opt into that type of technology to drive up to a charge point, which isn't just Pogo or isn't just Tesla, it's lots of other CPOs will adopt this as well, to drive in and take that experience as a plug and charge technology comes through. That's really, really cool for me. So that's something I'm excited about. Plug and charge, partnerships, roaming, all really cool. You know, we're open in terms of payment. You know that we work with Power and we work with Octopus, you know, and we're looking to do the same with roaming partners. There's a few partnerships. I'm not going to name them because we've not released them yet. There's a few that we've developed. One's already live. One will come through probably in November, maybe December, which is going to really open up our network. And it will make us accessible in terms of more drivers. It's going to help us with utilization. It's also going to help in terms of managing fewer integrations through roaming partners. So instead of going out to lots of different OEMs, we can actually consolidate that. And like I said, if we underpin that with that plug and charge experience, and I think we're onto a real winner there.
100%, absolutely. And I think, you know, if you look at the customer journey, whether you're purchasing something brand new in a dealership, or if you're getting something secondhand online, or, you know, if you just end up with an EV as a company car, expanding your visibility as a network by going via all of these different roaming partners and finding unique ways to utilize that technology to get your branding out there into more vehicles. You don't know how somebody's going to come across a Pogo charger for the very first time, whether it's going to pop up on a mapping application, or if it's going to be because they've seen it as they've physically driven past it, or if it's because they've gone onto the Power app or the Electroverse app. So yeah, definitely deepening your visibility is absolutely key, and that plug and charge is just it's a really, I'm so excited that you're going that way.
Yeah,
that's great.
I think as an industry that's something we should all be excited about, genuinely. And it all goes back to the stuff we were talking about earlier about that driver experience, and that feeds adoption, that confidence that someone gets, and they share that experience with a friend or a family member, and it gives them confidence to go and adopt an EV and come and join us in what we're doing. I think it's really, really important, and it's just that, that minimum amount of touch points in that customer journey, I think is really, really cool. For me, partnerships have been really key to the growth of Pogo over the past year. I think when I joined Pogo, which was June or July last year, we've really gone on a journey, and I think the industry's really, once you get into the bones of it, it's really centered around collaboration and partnerships. It's a way for us to challenge one another. We get continual improvement, we share ideas, and I think ultimately what it does is just add value. You get these layers of value that are added in there. And it doesn't mean that every partnership is right for every CPO, and it might not be right for every partner. But based on the brand, and the roadmap and what it is that we want to achieve, it's really going to be impossible to do that without partnering and collaborating with people. You add value in terms of customer journey and design, and that adds value to the experience of the drivers coming into the site, right? And it's the same when we talk about Power and Octopus, and those guys add value by offering flexible payment methods, and it's the same with the roaming partners we were just talking about. So there's these layers of value that are built up through partnerships and collaboration in our industry, and I think we maybe overlooked that at the start, but it's something we've been, and I've been really passionate about actually, is making sure that we're open as a business, and we select the right partners, of course, but we continually look at how we can add value to the customer journey.
100%. And I think any charge point network operator who is really just trying to continue to perform as a single entity without collaborating across industry are foolish to do so, because it is an integrated network. We're all trying to achieve the same thing. We don't need to be super competitive right now. We just want to make it super easy for people to transition to an electric vehicle. We can fight over the numbers later, but let's get the customers on the road, make sure their journeys are nice and seamless, and then we'll dig into the detail about why each network is better than the other one at a later date. But one of the first things you did, Stuart, when you started your role, I feel you must have sat down with a whacking great list of all the businesses that you wanted to work with, or you were interested in having a conversation with, because I got an email from you. It must have been literally your first week in the role saying, "Hi Kate, really interested in what you're doing at ChargeSafe. Would love to have a chat. I'm just kind of, getting settled into my brand new role, but can we catch up in the next few weeks?" So you were sending those emails right off the bat as soon as you got into that office. What was that thought process like?
It's the first thing that I saw, I think, is just this opportunity for us to add value through partners. It's, there are things that we do really, really well in our business, and we keep them in-house and we really value them. And there are things that other people do better than what we do, that they're ready-made, they're more experienced. I think a good analogy actually is when you select a Sky TV package, right? It depends on what product you want at the end and what experience you want to have. So you get a core package, and that can be, we've got a charger, we've got a basic design, we've got a team. But what are those additional licenses we're going to take out that wrap around that deliver the exact experience that we want? And like I said, it's different for us versus another CPO, and that's absolutely fine, but it depends on how you want to shape that. And for me, there were some that were really, really clear. We'd spoken about accessibility being really important to our brand, but we haven't partnered with anyone. And you were a name that were out there. You were, I think, making waves in terms of developing the design standards that the industry were following. And so were the partners. I've mentioned Power a few times, but Power as a fleet card that was specialising in the EV space, for me, it was a no-brainer. You know, we want fleet drivers to come into our hub. Who's the best partner to do that with?
Yeah.
You know, and it's really similar to your installation partners that you pick as well. What type of service do you want? What's important in terms of speed or quality or cost, and just understanding where everything sits and building that into a roadmap. I think for us, it's really easy because we build the roadmap and we know where we want to go.
Yeah.
And there are really clear partnerships that add value to that. So it's been really easy, but for me, it was a really quick win for us to get some of these key partners in that were going to take us a good way along that road.
Yeah, and for us, it's really similar. You know, we need those critical partnerships in place, like having a mapping provider. So I mentioned earlier about ZapMap. You know, hopefully they're going to be displaying the ChargeSafe score soon. So that mapping application is a really critical piece for us. Working with charge point network operators, so yourselves becoming accredited, has led to other charge point network operators coming to us and saying, "Hey, we'd love to know, how do we get to this, you know, 5-star rating standard?" So we've gone out and we've delivered to more, and that's influencing industry to make better choices about the stuff that's going into the ground. We've worked with local authorities. We've gone and visited Transport for Wales. We've talked to them about their unique challenges because of their, you know, just the way that their countryside is built. You know, I've spoken about this quite a few times where they said to me, "Kate, you know, we use wheel stops because I do not like wheel stops, but they use wheel stops because they don't want to put bollards in the ground because they need an architect to be present every time they put a spade in the ground in case they come across some bones, because that's just what you expect in Wales." So it's really interesting to see those unique challenges happening. And without those partnerships, I wouldn't understand those challenges better than I do now.
Exactly.
When we're talking about things that are being legislated and, you know, what the powers that be, the higher powers government can do to help encourage the industry along. You know, we've seen the ZEV mandate being pushed back by 5 years last year. That was particularly painful to my humble startup business, and I'm pleased that that should be brought back to 2030, and I'm hoping we're going to see that confirmed very soon. But in terms of the ZEV mandate, there's a lot of chat about it now being watered down. I think it's really important that the government stands firm to keep the confidence in the industry, to keep investors' confidence in the industry, and to allow the OEMs to stick to their plans of, you know, delivering all of these sexy new electric vehicles that will be coming to market in the next 6 years. That's a really critical one. But for me, selfishly, it's the BSI PAS 1899. As I've mentioned, it's a recommended standard by the British Standards Institute currently, and it's not perfect. I am currently a part of an implementation working group. So that means that we've kind of all sat around the table and we've discussed areas where it could be improved on, and they recognise, you know, all of the issues that I have brought up already, but they do recognise it's a highly technical paper. It is quite inaccessible in that it's difficult to digest and understand. There are definite gaps in that standard, and that's why I'm glad it hasn't been made mandatory just yet, because it's like your first draft, right? So in the next couple of years, I would really like to see a more firm commitment legally in terms of what CPOs must deliver on in terms of accessibility and user safety. So obviously we have some exceptional circumstances such as dark sky areas. I know that National Trust, you know, they can't light up their sites, as an example. And there are some sites where they are particularly narrow and they're not going to be made accessible. But as a broad stroke, these are the things that you must achieve as part of your site layout. That would be perfect.
Yeah,
that would be great.
I'd agree with that. I think that's been needed. Again, it's that standardizing of the customer experience to a certain level. There's always going to be USPs and, you know, different elements based on product and brand and how things are configured. But that baseline requirement absolutely is needed sooner rather than later. It's something that I've spoken about before, actually, and that nothing really exists at the moment. I know we've got some standards out there, but in terms of design and layout, and you know the way that the process of taking a charge actually works for people. I think that it just needs consolidation and standardization to a certain degree.
Pre-authorization also needs to be legislated.
Agreed. Yeah, I had a personal experience the other day where I had £85 on a pre-auth, which is beyond anything that my vehicle could possibly take. You know,
nobody is spending £85 on a single charge.
No, and it was 3 failed transactions as well, which was really frustrating. It was not
expensive.
a Pogo charger.
No, good.
But yeah, completely agree. You know,
will you use that charge point provider again?
It depends how desperate I am. I think as an EV driver, so my intent will be no.
Yeah.
But you never know. It depends.
And that's
it depends
too
where
excessive.
you are.
When you look at the user experience, you know, we're in a cost of living crisis. Who is going to be able to afford an £85 pre-authorization fee before they can actually pay for the charge? And I've personally had this experience. You know, a couple of years back, I've pulled up to a charge point. It's the day before payday, and I've got 40 quid in my bank account because, let's be real, I run a startup. 40 quid in my bank account, pulled up to the charger, £45 pre-auth fee. I could not charge my car, even though I knew I had enough money to pay for the charge because I couldn't afford the pre-auth fee. So I've gone in to the forecourt owner, which may or may not belong to an oil and gas company, and I asked the staff member inside the forecourt if they would be able to start it. I said, look, here's proof. I've got the funds in my account. I need the charge. I've got 10 miles left in vehicle. I don't know where else I'm going to be able to go. And they refused to help me. Now, as a customer, that experience is awful. Because I work in the industry, I did not return my car straight away because I know that things are improving day by day and we're getting better. But without something to hold these providers to account of, you know, it's excessive.
And this is where competition is healthy. Because for us, return, repeat, custom, you know, growth of the network utilization, it's essential.
Yeah.
So that constant look at the customer experience and collecting customer feedback and driver feedback is absolutely critical to whether or not we make a really good go of it. And that's a perfect example of where a network might struggle or be challenged. Certainly with an £85 pre-auth, I'd suggest that utilisation will decline based on the back of that decision. It doesn't make any sense or logic. But it's critical that people want to come and use our network because over the next 5, 10, 15 years, there will be an explosion of ultra-rapid hubs and different brands and different competitors. And a consolidation again, for sure. Yeah. But the volume of charge points being deployed right now, pending energization, where we have challenges along with everybody else, is huge. Yeah. You know, so there will be more choice. But I think today where there's not a huge amount of choice, I mean, you just asked, will I use that charge point again? And the answer is, I'll try not to. But the reality is, maybe, because I don't have a huge amount of choice. But when I do, absolutely no is the answer. I wouldn't use them.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks.